Hello, everyone.
Hello.
How are you?
Living the dream. How about you?
Living the dream. That
Yeah.
is great. I'm not sure if I'm living the dream, but I aspire to.
Yeah.
Let's see. I did not do this wisely. Let me get the notes link. I'm standing in for Crobe today, so things will not be as smooth. I am no Crobe. I'll try my best.
Do you get to say this is my favorite group?
I mean, we all know it's a lie. We know he starts every working group with that.
Yep. I think this is my favorite working group, mostly because of the topic, because this is something that I'm really passionate about. But this one. But then there's also the packaging ecosystem supply chain meeting. That one's also, I've been hoping for that meeting to have come into existence in some format in somewhere in the industry for a long time. I'm really glad it now exists, but I no longer work for a packaging ecosystem, so it's not it's not as personal as it once was. But yeah, this is definitely a topic that I'm passionate about.
Yeah. Because I know we changed the time, so I see a lot of new names, which is fantastic. That was the point of changing the time. What we normally do is there's a list of names and the attendees. You can add yourself and then change the color to something darker to show that you are here. And we will get started in just a second. I think we'll give folks one more minute. Vicky, I think you got to put the cat's name in the agenda.
Oh, totally. Nigel, do you want to disclose some vulnerabilities, buddy?
Yeah. What'd you find, Nigel? What little rats have you found?
Yes. He's killed several moths.
I bet it's not a kitty. Oh, this is good.
See, look at you finding all the bugs.
Gotta let the cat go after those remote access Trojans.
There you go. Stick him, buddy. There you go. All right.
I will put the agenda in the chat one more time because I know Zoom chat is not historical for folks who haven't. So please feel free to add yourself to the agenda so we know you're here. And I think we have a ton of first timers. So why don't we go around, folks if you feel comfortable introducing yourself, where you're from, what you want to get out of this group, and we will go from there.
I guess I'll jump in. My name is Eric Smalling. I am a developer advocate at Sneak on the container and cloud native side of the house. And I've just started attending OpenSSF meetings after being in the CNCF and Kubernetes SIGs for a while. Mainly here to keep my finger on the pulse of things so I know how to advocate to the team. And
Awesome.
help out wherever I can.
I will go next one. Hello, my name is Marta, and I'm the security lead for Eclipse on Neural Distribution. I have been to many groups of OpenSSF, and I recognize some people, but this one was the timing that didn't work for me at all before. So timing changed, I'm here.
That is fantastic. I think that was the point of the timing change, so glad to know we did something right. Are there others that are new that I want to introduce? Yeah.
Yeah, hi. I'm Megazone. Just call me MZ. That is my name, Megazone. I'm with F5 Inc. I'm the principal security engineer for the F5 Incident Security Incident Response team. I'm also our CNA guy, so I handle all the CVE disclosure things for F5. And here, as someone said, basically to kind of learn what's going on and keep my finger on things.
Excellent. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Sandipan from India. I am part of Red Hat Incident Response and also handling the secure engineering team.
Fantastic. Glad to have you. Anyone else who'd like to introduce themselves today? Okay, that's all right. So I think, like Crope said, he can't come today. I'm unfortunately only available for about till 25 minutes in. I think the Zoom should stay up. So if somebody wants to be taking notes and you all can continue the discussion after 25 minutes in, we think that'll be okay. So I think that the big item I know for today is the charter review or continued edits. There was, a request from the TAC that all the working groups have a charter. I think a lot of the working groups that started early in the creation of the OpenSSF have kind of just been working along and didn't do some of this paperwork, and we were probably one of them. And there's also the CVD guidance for security researchers to discuss and any opens. So why don't we start with the charter, if that sounds good to folks. Let me see if I can get my screen sharing up here. Okay, how about that? Yep, okay, excellent. Okay. So if people had a chance to read where this is at currently and any thoughts on where it is.
I'm not sure if we're supposed to do hands, but I'll just jump in. So
go for it.
Yeah. I have a question. So this charter is very similar to a lot of the working group charters in the OSSF. Is kind of like the skeleton, I don't know, template, skeleton, whatever you want to call it. So one of the questions I had with a lot of these is there's a lot about the TSC, right? And the TSCs, according to this charter, TSC, the Technical Security Committee of this group, is responsible for a whole slew of things. It's kind of unclear though who the TSC is and how you become on the TSC. Is it like voted? That to me is my main question and feedback is like, who is the TSC of this group? I'm not sure where it's written down, and how do you join the TSC? Presumably it's a meritocracy, but like what's the process? I don't know. I feel like that's the big gap, is like there's all this stuff about the TSC. It doesn't actually explain who the TSC is or how it gets formed and how you join it and et cetera, the governance around it. That's my main question. And I kind of like ask, do we want all of these things, are all of the things in this charter things we want to keep with the TSC? Should some of them be, maybe more simple, just consensus based? I don't know. But anyway, that is my main question, I guess, comment about the current charter.
So
Vicky, I can add some context to that, or if your hand was related to.
it's totally related to that. So I do a great deal of work with governance for a lot of projects over the past 30 or so years. And TSCs are not something that typically is in a working group. This is obviously, and in every single one of the working groups that I'm in, which is, I think, all of them at the moment, they are all dealing with this OMG, what is going on with this TSC stuff? Well, obviously somebody cut and paste just to give us a template to get started. Great, but TSCs don't make sense in a working group. They do in a project, right? And a technical project specifically. So I think that this is something that as a working group, it makes sense to get rid of and instead do some other form of governance, such as we have somebody who leads the meetings, they lead the working group, and then explain what that looks like and how that person gets chosen or nominated or otherwise. And I think that makes a lot more sense then, and just drop pretty much all of this TSC stuff, which is a great, there might be some stuff to keep there, but just we'll hand wave that at the moment, just say drop it.
Vicky, I'm a +1 to that. Jason, I think, because agree, I think this template came over to us as the general template, and particularly when you get into how you define maintainers, this working group is not going to have your typical artifacts for that. And I think, you know, already just in trying to point toward different repos where work may live, it's going to get messy.
Yeah, I agree, and I second everything Vicky said. You know, the one thing that I would suggest that I think that it'd be good to just talk about, you know, that we do things based on consensus. It's consensus-based governance, and just to make everything simpler. The one thing that I would suggest we need to figure out how we want to do a little bit more strict governance around is if when this working group produces artifacts or endorsements of artifacts, like on behalf of the OSSF, right? So when we produce something like the document we just produced, right? How do we ensure that we have that working consensus, right? Because I think, you know, one of the things that to me has been, I'll be completely honest, a little bit challenging with some of the stuff in the OSSF is like there's stuff that, you know, everything's kind of moving 5,000 miles an hour, and there's some things that kind of proceed and it's like, oh, we think we have consensus, so we're doing it. But it's like, you know, was there consensus? How many people were in the meeting where that proceeded? Like that to me is one of the things that I think is important to codify in these charters. Like, how are we validating for consensus? Is there a call in the mailing list? It's a call in the Slack channel, etc. For call for consensus for some of these things before we publish a document, before we put out the big blog post, before we say, hey, project XYZ is an official project of the vulnerability disclosures group, right? So those are the kinds of things to me. And I know I'm just kind of rambling here without actual work in the charter, but that's one of the things I'd probably, you know, if people are interested, I could go and volunteer some time to draft up some prose around that type of thing. Do people agree, or am I kind of barking up the wrong tree?
I think it makes sense to, you know, take a stab at that. Oh, that's a violent image. Sorry. To attempt that and see, you know, just throw a pull request in for the charter, and then we can have a look at the PR and add comments and iterate. I think that makes sense. Although we might end up with multiple PRs for the charter at this point with all the changes we're suggesting. Actually, Jason, if you want to tag team on that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to tag
Okay.
team with you on that, Vicky. Yep, I'd love to.
All right, I just dropped my email address in the chat. So drop me a line and we can get going on that.
Maybe we can say that you two create the pull request and all other comments go through that pull request from other people.
That sounds great, Marta.
Other areas of the charter that people feel like we need to do some edits? They weren't sure how that fits with this working group.
I was personally also taken by the fact that there's TSC everywhere and I was blocked at this point already. So I think I need some other definition and then I can comment on more things.
Excellent. Yeah, Jason and I can take a first pass through this and, you know, it's all in Git. So if we remove or change something that shouldn't be, well, we can fix it.
And Vicky, I think you probably have good visibility into, I know some of the other conversations going on in the OpenSSF right now are how are projects accepted? What is the process for, like when we did the CVD guide, I think we also were kind of bouncing around with the board, like how does this get a stamp? How does it not? So I know a lot of these answers are probably happening in parallel.
Yeah, there is a lot going on right now at that. As far as, you know, whether things get accepted or not, as Jason brought up, I think that's something that we can define. Because of the sort of deliverables that a working group has, it typically doesn't need to get up to that level. But as far as I know, nobody's really discussed that type of acceptance, whether these deliverables need to go up to, say, board level for approval. So I suspect they don't, but it's a good question. So whoever is very, very kindly taking notes, first of all, thank you. And second of all, could you make sure that's represented so we don't forget to think about that as we work through the process?
Let me see if I'm capturing this right. Of this. Yeah, feel free to edit if I didn't get them. I think that those were the two big questions.
Yeah. Cool, thank you for that.
If there's no other questions about the charter, should we move on, excuse me, to the CVD guidance for security researchers? See some nods? Okay, let's do it. I actually missed the last meeting where most of this was brought up. Has someone been more involved with this who could maybe give us an update about where this is and where it needs to go next?
I think that it just, if I'm right, they made a repo for it and a doc, and I think that's where it's at right now, unless somebody else knows more. But I think it's just starting.
Well, let's open up this draft CVD guide. The bottom link is what it looks like they are working in. I'm going to guess from the crickets that we maybe don't have the right people here to give us an update on what's going on. Maybe we'll toss that into the mailing list or Slack. Sound good? Okay. Other opens, things people want to discuss this week.
Gosh, we're a quiet bunch this week.
So
We're
who's
never
working-
quiet.
who-
Yeah,
who's-
Jonathan.
All right. Yeah. Who's working on this document directly? Who are the owners of this document?
The
It looks
owner
like the
appears-
only contributor right now is Crobe, isn't it? Or-
Oh, well, that explains a lot why there's a lot of crickets. I sent Crobe I wrote up a long thing about vulnerability disclosure and my experience with vulnerability disclosure. It was directed specifically to, I was chatting with some people in the Github Security Lab. And the Github Security Lab people are like, it's a combination of both the people that work at GitHub and also the people that like are security researchers participating in getting bug bounties out of the Github Security Lab. And there's a long discussion around, bug bounty payment, or not bug, about bug bounties and how bug bounties and vulnerability disclosure kind of collide with each other. And I had a bit of a, so I sent this to Crobe. Wow, sorry. I don't know if this is, I don't think this is in a state that I could just plop it somewhere. Yeah, because it was really specific, but I could edit this down and send this somewhere. But some of the stuff that I try to encode like my experience and knowledge and like stuff that I've learned doing vulnerability disclosure in open source for the past 3 years, and like the pitfalls that you quickly fall into in that area. So like, I've done this the kind of like, I've done this before. Don't fall into the same traps that I've fallen into in the past.
I think you're going to be absolutely invaluable to this document, Jonathan, frankly, because of all of us in the group, I think you've probably done this sort of stuff the most.
I was expecting there to be more people. Is it just are there more people doing this sort of open source vulnerability disclosure? Like it seems like I am surprised that I'm the only one here with experience, right? Like, well, why? What is up with the rest of the industry? Is there's nobody else that's doing this sort of thing, or am I just in the right place at the right time? Like, I also like my experiences have been like, I've had a lot of experience, but I've also like, I don't feel like I have a lot of experience. So like, I feel like I guess is the imposter syndrome kicking in a little bit. So but like, how am I the only person here that's or one of the only people?
I expect that part of it, Jonathan, is because like, researchers would probably more concentrate on places they can get bounties, which are probably less often open source projects, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of why Google started Project Zero back in the day, was to fill this gap, right? But the economics is going to have a lot to do with it. If I'm going to spend 5 days working on a problem, do I want to get paid for that or not?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yeah, Jonathan, I think you have a lot of people here who are on the other side, on the, the response side, receiving your reports, your fine reports. But I think that's a great question. And Jason, maybe point to, there's kind of an incentive if we need to hear these voices more to understand, we've done a good job, I think so far, trying to think about it from the maintainer perspective, but we really have a lack of representation from the researcher perspective. And I'd love your suggestions on how we make this more valuable to them.
So
Yeah.
SNCC has a research group that does vulnerability research. Is that I believe that's true. We should potentially reaching out to the Project Zero team, right, and saying like, hey, we're here. We'd love to have your input. I'd also love to meet some people from Project Zero, because I've watched, I've seen their vulnerability disclosures for years and followed that whole thing. And it's like, oh, they've been doing cool stuff. I'd love to meet some of those people. Are there any other big research groups like this White Source? But are there any there's people from the GitHub Security Lab that are doing research too. And they've got some people there that have been doing this for a long time as well. So maybe doing some outreach in that area around like, hey, like we know you have a lab, like let's like we would love to have your team come participate here.
Well, we do have some people here. We've got Madison is here from Github Security Lab, and Eric is here from Sneak. So maybe they can kind of give us some suggestions on how best to approach getting more researchers involved. Anne, is your hand still up, or is that?
No, a new hand, because I think maybe to Madison's point about, I don't think it's a reasonable expectation for researchers to be continuous active participants in the OpenSSF. So we have to think about maybe going to them where they are, but figuring out what are we asking of them and how do we make it kind of scoped and limited. Because no, I wouldn't expect that they would show up. But, and also if that includes reaching out to Project Zero, I'm happy to facilitate that and see if we can get some of their time.
Cool.
I do love the idea of having more researchers involved. Oh, sorry, did I cut somebody off?
I was just going to say that also, you know, we at Hunter, I think our security research and open source maintainer community is about 6,000 people right now. So happy to connect or like act as a bridge between our community and the workings of the group to relay you know, comments from our community back and see, you know, what constructive feedback we can find.
Yeah, I'm also happy to do some outreach. I'm working at HackerOne. I know a very large group of researchers and happy to do outreach. Are there specific projects we would like people to work on so they have a clear task in mind? Or do we want people who will be willing to participate long-term?
I suspect that in the short term, helping give input on the document we're creating. And then perhaps we can seduce them into staying for the longer term because we're just such nice people.
Madison, Hawa is also working on a project in this area too, and you might want to ping her about maybe her, because she's doing active like engagement research with individual researchers and saying like, hey, like what's been your experience, you know? And so she's got a
GitHub Sec Lab has a lot of connections both internally. Our security team often finds a lot of vulnerabilities and is the one disclosing. And because of our position, people also disclose to us all the time. So we have a lot of people from both sides, both internal to GitHub and a lot of external reporters and users that we work with. Like very often we have really great working relationships with. Jonathan is one of them. So we definitely have already existing connections that we can leverage for this that I'm happy to start making. Somebody within our security lab, I shared the link in Zoom chat, had worked on this just a couple months ago, creating a sort of vulnerability disclosure guide for reporters specifically. So I think what we want to do in this working group is probably a lot more in depth than that one. But I plan on taking those same concepts and adding them to this and incorporating them basically as soon as I can find the time to. But we have a lot of working relationships with reporters, both internal and external to GitHub, that I'm happy to bring into this working group, like whenever it makes sense.
Excellent. It looks like our Anne had to drop off. Do we have
also
more? Yeah, Jonathan.
Katie Masuris too would be a really good resource if anybody, you know, I know I'm good friends with her, but if somebody from the Linux Foundation wanted to reach out to her in a more official capacity, that might be a good, you know, just because she's been doing this for so long and knows so many ins and outs and so many legal perspectives.
Katie is at where?
She runs her own company. She's the Luda Security. She's the person that if you shout bug bounty program 3 times, she'll appear out of the mirror.
Okay, I need a name for I don't know Katie, so
Okay,
just say
yeah,
Katie and
Katie Masuris. If you Google, you'll find her Wikipedia page. But yeah, she's at Luda Security.
can you spell her last name for me, please, sir?
Give me.
Chat for you.
Oh, did you?
Pardon?
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. I see it in the
Thank
chat now.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna have to look that one up myself anyway. So you beat me to it. Thank you.
All right. I can't type this morning, apparently. All right, look at all these great suggestions. All of this is very helpful and will help us move, especially get some very knowledgeable eyes on the document. But we probably should get our own eyes on the document as well, and not simply have CRUB do the heavy lifting. So does anyone want to put their hand up to review and edit and perhaps add to the document? Madison? Lovely, thank you.
Madison, if you want to do that in a pair, I'd do that in a pair with you if you wanted to.
Yeah, sure. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can plan that after this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to add to the differences between a bug bounty and a vulnerability disclosure program pitfalls section.
Okay, so Madison, Jonathan, and Crystal.
And then
Can we, out of the curiosity, sorry, go ahead.
oh, Kayla's not here, but she would also like to work on that. We talked about that last week.
Kayla, okay. And that's Kayla, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Can we be specific about companies and company names and the pitfalls of using versus cert? Okay, let me provide an example, right? If you disclose a vulnerability via GitHub, the information that you encode in the disclosure has like a structured format, and then that structured format, especially if you do the disclosure fully, like it gets published in a way that that data is parsable by machines. But if you do disclosures via SNCC and you get a CVE via SNCC, if you don't publish that with another way, then SNCC publishes it and they give a CVE for it, but their database is closed source and closed. And so if you want to use it for structured data, like for example, if you're building a Dependabot, or you're building, some open source tool to audit for security vulnerabilities, you have to curate all that data again. And that's why personally, I use Github Security Advisories to publish my disclosures, because at least I'm publishing it in a curated, formatted way that those tools can automatically scrape. And because GitHub's database is Creative Commons, like I prefer to do that, but I also prefer to use SNCC as a CNA. So like you're including these like concerns and issues about specific companies and why you might want to use a specific company versus another one. Is that like okay in the context of like this article, or is that, do we want to avoid like, well, this is the downside of using X company for a CNA, and this is the upside, like is that an okay thing to include in this document?
I would be in favor of being vendor neutral. I think that was something discussed really early on in the working group, but
when you're doing CVE issuance though, like the vendor has, like if you want to get a CVE, there are different pitfalls of using different ones, right? That you may not know without experience of having done this, which I do have the experience of because I've done this long enough. But I know, like that's why I use the vendors that I do in this context, because if you disclose in a specific way, your information, the information you disclose doesn't go out in a way that is easily consumable by other tools, and then somebody else has to recurate that data again.
love to hear the thoughts of everybody else. I mean, it sounds a bit like that would be reviewing pros and cons of different vendors, which I don't know for a large enough group to weigh in on that, but I'd love to hear other people's thoughts.
If nothing else, because I do think it might be a slippery slope for the organization to start having these vendor related conversations. if nothing else, I would love to have Jonathan write his own independent on the side blog post. He can then, now I know. Come on, man.
I mean,
because
writing for me is, it's not that I don't mind writing, it's that writing for me is a really difficult process. It's like, it takes a lot of time. So, I'd be happy to write it with somebody collaboratively, but me sitting down and writing a blog post is actually a ton of work.
Yeah, trust me, in the middle of my second book, I understand.
ADHD over here.
But it is the sort of thing that, where you publish and the ramifications of that, if there is some way to discuss that in the document in a somewhat vendor neutral way, such as there are differences in where you publish your CVE, and here are some of the things you might expect just in general without naming names. Maybe there's a way to do that in the document. So I think it, depending upon, I fully admit I have not read the doc, right? But maybe there's a way to fit it in there, and if not, maybe that's a conversation that we can have for a different doc or a blog post or something like that. But it does seem like making it easier and setting up appropriate expectations for researchers, this is kind of part of the deal. So it kind of seems like it's in scope for the document. It's just how we word it.
Yeah, I would agree on it. For an official type document, I would not name names. That gets political, and somebody might refuse to use the document or say it's biased or whatever. But as a separate, like an informal community document, a separate document of reviews of things, or like a pros and cons document that's separate, that's not part of like a standards type thing, is probably more useful. But I was also going to say, in the end, also every CVE that's published does end up in the CVE.org database and the NVD database. So there are, no matter who you go through as a CNA, it's going to end up in a publicly usable standardized JSON format.
Right.
The time delta varies wildly, though. The time delta for how long it takes to get over there.
I think one of the issues too is like, you can't avoid company names, right? Like MITRE is a company, right? Like, every single CNA is not a non-for-profit, right? Every single CNA is under a corporate entity.
Mm-hmm.
And so the choice to pick a CNA is going to be itself a vendor decision, kind of. I mean, it's not a vendor that the vendor actually sells the product, right? Vendors like, White Source and SNCC are not selling, we're a CNA, they're selling their data, right? But there's a decision that you're making around picking which one of these CNAs you want to work with and why you might want to pick one over another one. And those are companies, those are tied to companies, unfortunately, because the whole ecosystem for CVE issuance is tied to a company.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it does complicate things, but there may be a way to phrase it yeah, I'll just leave it at there may be a way to phrase it. Adam, you have your hand up, friend.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of leading on from what Jonathan was saying. I wonder if if the working group has ever discussed vulnerability reports made to the various, vendors, databases, whatever, that don't receive CVEs, because I think there's a vested interest in some vendors to keep vulnerability information proprietary. And so they don't necessarily, or like for whatever reason, maybe they haven't received a request for a CV or whatever it might be, they don't necessarily issue one. And then so you don't have those vulnerability records kind of spreading through the various ecosystems because of this, which also creates difficulties. And I think every vendor is at fault of this, right? I don't think any vendor consistently 100% of the time will issue a CV for every single vulnerability record of value, will issue a CV, but I'm not sure how you also solve that problem. But maybe this is kind of like a tangential topic.
Thank you. Yeah, it does seem like it will be tricky with that. It might be something that has to be decided as the document is built, figure out what I think we're talking all theoretically without actually seeing what's in the document right now, most of us. And so it's great to have the information out here. So we know that as we are looking at the document, because we're all going to look at the document, right? That these are things we should be keeping in mind as we do it. And we do have a bunch of people who have volunteered to look at the document, which is wonderful. Thank you all. Can you commit to having some progress on that by next meeting in 2 weeks? It's like Madison, Jonathan, Crystal, Kayla.
I think we can. Not,
Okay.
not complete, but some progress.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Some progress.
Yes. Wonderful.
I presume you want us to do all of our edits in suggestion mode?
Yes.
Perfect.
And
Can do.
are there other people who would like to claim some of these sections? Because I think it would be great if we could get some ownership for additional sections here.
And for the people who are not looking at the document, I will, well, as soon as I can open the darn thing, there we go. I will drop that link into the chat for you. So if you haven't seen it yet, look. And it might be difficult to have a look at that and listen to a meeting. So I understand that will be, you might not be able to do that right now, but if you look at this and see something that you would like to participate in, please leave a comment and or put your name on that. And then we can start making progress, because we do have a deadline on this, since we would like to, I believe it was August. Yes, at Black Hat. Which means we got to get going.
Is the Black Hat CFP is closed. Is there something that? Wait, yeah, where is this getting presented for Black Hat then?
That's a Crobe question.
Okay.
The only thing that is still open is the arsenal, but it's for open source tools, so I don't think we want to.
Yeah.
We can write an open source tool that prints it on the screen, but that's for
DEF CON's still open, and besides Las Vegas hasn't published their CFP as far as I can tell. I looked today and I couldn't find it, so.
Okay, how about I shoot a mail to the list and see whether somebody has already done something on this? And if not, whether they have ideas and how we're just gonna slide through the back door somehow. And yeah.
Maybe get it into a, I guess.
It
Black
could
Hat
have
doesn't
already
have the
been,
village.
someone might
Yeah.
have already submitted it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So somebody could have done this work already, and we just don't know. So that's something that we will need to capture. So I'll shoot, I will send off a message to the mailing list.
Yep.
I've been having trouble with my mailing list for some reason, so hopefully it'll work. Okay, oh, I should capture that in the notes. All right, anything else on this document? Or are we all just going to pile in and make some progress by next meeting? I do recommend everyone have a look and put your name on a section or start editing. Please try to edit in suggest mode as much as possible until that gets incredibly messy and we have to start accepting suggestions.
For the people who've claimed sections, does anybody mind if those are not done in suggest mode? Because it looks really
Sorry, say this again.
strange at first.
That makes perfect sense.
Okay, fantastic.
If people can do what not in suggestion mode, what part?
If people have claimed ownership of a section,
Oh, sure.
then that part would not be in suggest mode, just because it gets really hard to read for the people trying to review it.
That makes good sense.
Yep.
I can't type. Okay, that's good. That's Brilliant. Thank you for pointing that out, Crystal. Okay, do we have more to cover on this? If not, we will call for opens. And if no opens, then we all get 15 minutes to grab some more tea before our next call. Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay. Then it looks like we are done for the day. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our very first meeting at this time. And it's wonderful to have all these new people able to join us. So go home. Okay. Bye, y'all.
Hi, thank you.
Yep.